Greetings and welcome to the Modern Alchemist channel. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist, and this is Ninja Alchemist 9. Today on Ninja Alchemist 9, we're going to talk about some fun stuff. We're going to talk about astral projection, and we're going to talk about Superman and how he does it, and see if we can't combine the two and work our minds into maybe having a more productive experience when we astral project, flying like a superstar. So, let's begin. The first thing I want to point out is if you haven't had a chance to watch Human Alchemy and the Art of Thinking, you might want to give it a view. From this point on, I'm going to keep referring to certain vocabulary that I introduced there. And specifically, we're going to talk about subjective self, middle self, and objective self, and how that relates to all of this. All right, so if you haven't done it yet, you probably want to, so pause. If you have, go for it. And you might be able to just work your way through it because it is pretty intuitive. It's not like it's like rocket science or anything. All right, so specifically, when Superman is flying, he says a certain thing. He goes through this like almost a mantra. He'll go up, up, and away. And you have to ask yourself, why is he saying that? Like I've been asking myself, I had asked myself that for years until I sorted it out. And you say, well, why does he say up, up, and away? Who's he talking to? Well, he's talking to the three forms of the self. He's talking to the subjective self, the middle self, and the objective self. Specifically, he's acknowledging the boundaries or the bounds of consciousness that exist for each one of those levels. So for the subjective self, he calls out up. Now, why is this important to recognize? Well, in three-dimensional space, there are only two objective directions. There's either moving towards a thing or there's moving away from a thing. That's it. There's only moving to or away from. No left, no right, none of that. That's all subjective direction. In a three-dimensional universe where we're sitting on a sphere, that's it. It's either to or away, right? So Superman recognizes this. But when you're on the sphere and you're in a body and you want to fly, the idea then is it's up because the ground is down and the sky is up. So Superman calls out and he says up. Now the second time he does it, he's speaking to the middle self and he's telling the middle self up because the middle self has to recognize that it's also bound to physical limitations. Even though it does have comprehension or an understanding rather, he understands what the objective self may perceive, it's still bound to subjective reasoning, and it has to synthesize that. So Superman calls out up to his subjective self to remind it, you need to go up. Finally, he says away. He doesn't fly until he says away. And that's because the objective self has the actual, it knows the truth. The truth is that there is only a way. There's either flying to something or away from a thing. And so Superman says, away, and he takes off and he flies. And then from that point, it's simply adjusting, either flying towards or away from objects that are relative to his current position. That's it. And then he flies. Now, you want to ask yourself, how exactly, what is the mechanic then of Superman's flying? And you could actually say that the mechanic has to do with a lot of mechanics that we understand as people. Specifically, we have language that describes, like when you're in a positive mood, you're up, your mood is up, you're elevated, you're lighthearted, right? All of these describe elevation and lifting. When you're in a negative mood, it's exactly the opposite. You're depressed, you're down, you're restrained, you may be receptive, but the reception is only to more negative, right? And so if you keep that in mind as a mechanic that is actually describing something that we are intuiting as living beings subjected to the electric universe and all its constraints, if you recognize that we are actually communicating actual principles, then you know that when Superman flies up into the sunlight to absorb light and he's charging himself up, he's actually charging himself up with positive energy, positive ionization, right? Positive ions, protons, whatever you want to call it. It is the positive potential that he is absorbing and he's rejecting the negative potential, right? So it's a discharge, similar to what you see when a cometary body is moving from the outer solar system, where it's received a negative charge, and as it comes into the inner solar system, it's discharging that negative charge and assuming a positive charge, which then will eventually push it away from the sun as it shoots back around. So this is this mechanic of oscillation where it goes from a negative charge to a positive charge to a negative charge. And we do the same thing ourselves. And so by utilizing that knowledge, which Superman is an electrical being, I mean, right down to his toes, because he literally feasts on the light, right? He consumes it. And if he can't consume light directly, he can consume it indirectly through objects that have absorbed light, as Frank Miller's comic book, The Dark Knight, reveals when he sucks up all the energy within an entire rainforest, right, to revitalize himself. So when you use this knowledge then in a meditation that's designed to take you and move you into an astral place, recognize that that when you're there, the way to move around more effectively is to just recognize that you're just moving either towards a thing or away from another thing. And the degree to which you can then move, the speed at which you move, is dependent largely on your attitude. This then is why those that are magicians, why they are constantly admonished that to maintain a pure heart, to maintain an attitude of where you're ennobled, where there's no negative that is set upon you, because the only tools that are of use against you or for you in an astral realm then would be ones that would affect you directly psychologically, because there's no physical involved. And so if you haven't sorted your shit out, then you can be in trouble. And that's part of the art. That's part of the art. That's part of it to become an alchemist or a magician, is to sort that out, to explore it, to plumb the very depths, to look into that abyss, because it's just you're looking back at you, and recognize what's causing you to do those things. And then either if it's if it is something that is more productive, then embrace it, and if it's less productive, then reject it. Towards or away, towards or away. That principle applies to everything: astral projection, Superman flying, and the way the electric universe operates as spheres and everything else, right? Biological systems, all of it. It's all the same. All right, now you know, and knowing's half the battle. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist, and this is Ninja Alchemist 9. I'll be talking to you soon.